If I hadn't heard the chainsaw myself, I would have thought it was a bad joke. But no, there she was, Vivica Garland, the HOA president and resident tyrant, cutting through my son's treehouse like it owed her money. It was a Saturday morning, just after sunrise. I was brewing coffee in the kitchen when I heard the whining roar of power tools. At first, I thought someone down the block was trimming trees. Then I heard shouting followed by a sickening crack. I sprinted outside barefoot and saw her. Mid-50s, platinum bob, yoga pants, and that ridiculous leopard print windbreaker she always wore. Vivica was standing near the base of the oak tree in our backyard, my backyard, holding a chainsaw that was still idling in her hands like it was a trophy. "Vivica, what the hell are you doing?" I yelled. She turned, smug as ever, and said, "That structure violates HOA guidelines, Nathan. Unapproved, unsightly," and before she could finish, I heard the creak. My 8-year-old son, Sawyer, had been inside the treehouse when she started cutting. "Sawyer!" I bolted toward the tree just as the platform gave way. He fell through the collapsing boards, scraping his leg on a broken beam before landing hard on the grass below. He screamed. I dropped to my knees beside him. "You're okay, buddy, you're okay. Stay still." His shin was bleeding and his wrist looked swollen. I scooped him up and ran toward the house, yelling over my shoulder, "You just assaulted my kid, Vivica. You might want to call your lawyer." She didn't even flinch. "That structure was a violation. I sent notices." I didn't care. I got Sawyer into the car and we headed straight to the ER. 2 stitches, a sprain, and a terrified little boy later, the deputy met us back at the house. I had already printed out the security cam footage from the backyard. Deputy Langston took one look at the video and whistled. "She didn't even check if anyone was up there. This is reckless endangerment at the very least." "Felony assault," I said. "That chainsaw was a weapon," Langston nodded. "Get me the HOA documents. If she acted outside her authority, this is going to get ugly." Oh, it was going to get ugly. Vivica Garland picked the wrong tree and the wrong dad. By Sunday morning, half the neighborhood had heard what happened. Sawyer was asleep upstairs with his leg propped on pillows and a stack of comics by his side. I sat at the kitchen table with a manila folder spread open in front of me, documents, bylaws, the HOA's own charter. My laptop screen glowed with the security footage queued up, paused right at the moment Vivica stepped into our yard with the chainsaw. Deputy Langston had called again that morning. "We're moving this up," he said. "DA's office wants a formal statement. Bring everything you've got." I grabbed the folder and drove to the precinct. The room they put me in was small, with a 2-way mirror and a desk that had seen better decades. A young Ada named Carla Monroe came in, sharp suit, braided hair, no-nonsense energy. "You're Nathan Brenner?" she asked, flipping open a notepad. "Yeah," she tapped the folder. "Let's walk through it." We went over everything: Vivica's entry onto my property, the lack of warning, the fact she never checked if anyone was in the treehouse. I handed over the footage, the injury report from the hospital, and a printed copy of the HOA's own Article 13, which clearly stated that any enforcement involving home structures required a 30-day written violation notice and a formal hearing before any physical action could be taken. "She bypassed all of it," I said. "Went straight to demolition. No notice, no warning, no hearing." Carla flipped through the charter I brought. "And this says the HOA has no jurisdiction over backyard structures under 10 feet tall," exactly, which the treehouse was. "I measured it myself when we built it." She nodded slowly. "All right. We're charging her with felony reckless endangerment, trespassing, destruction of private property, and assault with a dangerous tool. You may get a call to testify." "She's still the HOA president?" I asked. "For now. But let's see how the arraignment goes." When I returned home, there were 3 neighbors waiting by my driveway: Mr. Kim from across the street, the Sanchez couple from 2 doors down, and Dana, who just moved in last month. Mr. Kim looked uneasy. "We heard about Sawyer." "Is he okay?" "He's healing," I said. "Tired, sore, but he's tough." Dana stepped forward. Vivica came by my yard last week with a clipboard and told me to remove my garden beds, said they were an eyesore. I didn't think she'd go this far. She didn't have the authority, I said. Not for any of what she's been doing, Sanchez nodded. We've been fined 4 times this year for things that aren't even in the handbook. She makes it up as she goes. Want to do something about it? I asked, already knowing the answer. Because I'm filing for a special vote to remove her. They all agreed fast. That night, I drafted the petition. According to the HOA's own bylaws, if 1/3 of homeowners signed a request for an emergency vote, the board was required to act within 7 days. I designed a flyer with a QR code linking to the petition and printed one for every mailbox on the block. Monday morning, I walked the neighborhood before sunrise, sliding the flyers into mail slots. By the time I got home, my phone had already buzzed 3 times with notifications from the petition site. By breakfast, it was 27 signatures and climbing. Then came the email. Subject: Urgent HOA notice false allegations sender, V. Garland at Willow Creek HOA org. She claimed the treehouse was unstable, a public hazard, and that she had verbal consent from me to remove it. I read the whole thing twice just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Not only had I never given her consent, I had video evidence proving the opposite. But clearly, she was trying to control the narrative before the truth spread too far. At noon, I walked into the HOA office. It was inside a converted garage attached to Vivica's house, because of course it was. The door was open. Inside sat Curtis, the HOA secretary, a retired accountant who mostly kept to himself. His eyes widened when he saw me. "She's not here," he muttered. "Good, I'm not here for her. I need the last 6 months of meeting minutes, violation notices, and board votes." "Full copies," he hesitated. "She usually handles, not anymore. This is an official request under Article 6, Section 2, full transparency upon written demand, and here," I said, handing him a signed letter, "is your written demand." Curtis took it with shaking hands. "You know, I never agreed with how she ran things, but she kept everyone too afraid to say anything." "Not anymore," I said. "People are talking now." By evening, the petition had over 60 signatures, more than half the households in the subdivision. I compiled everything into a packet. The petition, the incident report, photos of Sawyer's injury, and a notarized letter requesting a special meeting for a vote to remove Vivica Garland from her position as HOA president. I emailed it to the full board, CC'd the town's zoning office, and blind copied every homeowner who signed the petition. The next morning, the HOA's attorney showed up at my door. He wore a tweed blazer and looked like he hadn't slept. "This has gone too far," he said, barely keeping his voice level. "Vivica has served this community for over 15 years, and she nearly killed my son," I said, "so here's what's going to happen. The vote gets scheduled. The petition stands. And if Vivica wants to spin fairytale emails, we'll let the courts sort that out. She's willing to resign quietly if the petition gets pulled. No deal," he paused. "The board's meeting tonight. Expect an official response." That night, the meeting was held on Zoom, Vivica's idea, probably to avoid having to face anyone in person. But that plan backfired immediately. Over 70 households logged in. People who never showed up to HOA meetings were suddenly front and center, cameras on, ready. Vivica appeared in a corner window, her face tight, her background suspiciously blurred. "I'd like to begin by reminding everyone that we must follow due process," she said. "There have been certain exaggerations circulating." I unmuted. "There's nothing exaggerated about a child being hospitalized or about a chainsaw being used illegally," Dana chimed in, "or about false fines. I've got copies right here." Then Mr. Kim, "and bullying. She threatened to tow my daughter's car during finals week." The chat exploded. Dozens of comments flooded in. Curtis, who had joined the call from a dim kitchen, raised his hand. "I move we vote to remove Vivica Garland from her role as president, effective immediately." "I second," said Dana. Vivica's voice cut in shrill now. This is a stunt, this is a mob, but the motion had been made. And under the rules, a motion seconded by 2 board members on record had to be followed by a vote. Curtis raised his hand again. All in favor, hands went up across the screen. One by one, people clicked the voting button. The final tally, 68-2, Vivica's window vanished. She'd logged off. Curtis looked straight into his camera. Well, I guess we need a new president. But that wasn't the end. 2 days later, I got a call from Ada Monroe. Thought you'd want to know, she said. Arraignments tomorrow. We're not offering a deal. She's getting charged with full counts, I exhaled. Sawyer'll be glad to hear it. And one more thing, she added. The zoning board's investigating her past enforcement actions. Turns out this wasn't the first time she crossed the line. I thanked her, hung up, and looked out the window at the backyard. The tree was still standing tall minus the splintered remains of the platform, but I had plans to rebuild, stronger, higher. And this time, with the whole neighborhood behind it, revenge wasn't what I was after, just justice. And justice, at long last, had showed up with a badge, a court date, and 70 neighbors who'd finally had enough. On Friday afternoon, a week after the vote that sent Vivica packing, a plain envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. I brought it inside, tore it open at the counter, and froze. Inside was a single photographed Sawyer sitting in the partially built treehouse, smiling, hammer in hand. On the back, in shaky capital letters, someone had written, "Should have stayed quiet." I stared at it for a few seconds longer than I should have, then grabbed my phone and called Deputy Langston. He picked up on the second ring. "Brenner, I just got a threat," I said, holding the photo up to the kitchen light. "No note, just a picture, my son in the treehouse. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. You still got the envelope?" "Yeah, no postmark." "Looks like it was hand-delivered. I'll be there in 20 minutes. While I waited, I checked the front and backyard cameras, nothing from the previous night. But when I flipped through the early morning footage, there it was at 4:06 a.m., a shadowy figure walking up to the mailbox. Hoodie, quick steps, no visible face. They were gone in under 10 seconds. Langston arrived with another deputy and a brown paper evidence bag. They watched the footage in silence, then took the envelope, the photo, and a copy of the video. Langston didn't look surprised, just disappointed. "We'll run it through the lab, might get prints off the photo." "You think it's her?" I asked. He gave a slow nod. "Or someone doing it for her. She's got loyalists. We're already investigating a handful of her past citations. Now this. This adds weight. By Monday, the neighborhood had transformed. Where people once avoided eye contact and waved politely from afar, now they gathered in driveways, on sidewalks, near mailboxes. Shared stories turned into strategy. There was talk of forming a resident oversight committee, drafting new bylaws, even dissolving the HOA altogether. But something darker was happening too. A homeowner named Elise, who lived 3 houses down, came to my door that evening. She had twin toddlers and looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. "They slashed my tires," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "All 4. Last night, no note, no cameras. I filed a report." I invited her in. She sat at the kitchen table, eyes darting toward the front window. "It's not random," she said. "The day after the vote. Come on." Another neighbor, Ron, a retired postal worker, had his garbage cans overturned and spray painted with the word traitor. 2 others reported strange calls at odd hours, no voice, just silence. Word got back to me that Vivica had retained a private attorney. Not the HOA's lawyer, the board had formally cut ties with him, but someone new. An aggressive type out of Birmingham who specialized in civil litigation. She was preparing a defamation suit. "Let her sue," I said during a Wednesday evening meeting in my garage where about a dozen neighbors had gathered. "Truth is a defense, and we've got enough documentation to fill a U-Haul." Curtis arrived late, looking rattled. He dropped a flash drive on the workbench between us. "I pulled this from her files," he said. "She had a private folder on the HOA server, password protected, but I got in." We gathered around my laptop while it booted. The folder was labeled Compliance Leverage. Inside were PDFs, names of homeowners, photos of their houses, notes typed in bold red font. Delinquent cousin lives here. Works nights, won't notice violations. Divorcing likely to cave fast. Dana stepped back from the bench like it had burned her. She was building blackmail files. I clicked through more documents. One had my name. It listed the treehouse, the date we started construction, and a note. If needed, use as leverage, plays handyman for sympathy. Curtis looked like he might throw up. She started this years ago. I think she was planning to run for a town council seat. This was her power base. I copied everything to a secure drive and sent it to Monroe at the DA's office. She called back the next day. I've seen a lot, she said. But this is premeditated coercion. If we can link these files to any fines or enforcement actions, we're looking at conspiracy charges. Add harassment too, I told her. People are being stalked. We'll escalate. And Nathan, keep your cameras rolling. This isn't over. That Friday, a subpoena was issued for Vivica's personal computer, along with a search warrant for her home. The sheriff's department executed it at 7 a.m. By 8, half the block had gathered to watch her being led out in a beige coat, arms crossed tightly, lips pressed white. She didn't say a word. Just stared straight ahead as flash drives, hard drives, and boxes of documents were loaded into the back of a cruiser. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because by Saturday night, someone had broken into my shed. They didn't take anything, just trashed it. Tools scattered, shelves knocked over, nails poured onto the floor. But what got me was the message. The word liar carved into the workbench. Deep, jagged, fresh. I filed another report. Langston came personally. We think it's someone close to her, he said. She's not the only one going down, and they know it. I set up more cameras, one in the shed, 2 in the backyard, 1 in the tree itself. I wasn't taking chances. The following week, Monroe called again. We've indicted her on 5 counts, she said. Reckless endangerment, criminal trespass, assault, conspiracy to defraud, and evidence tampering. Her arraignment's set for the end of the month. What about the others? We're building the case. With those files you sent and the statements coming in, this could reach a dozen people. Maybe more. The new HOA board met that night. Curtis was acting president, and he'd already drafted a motion to dissolve the previous enforcement committee entirely. We voted unanimously to replace it with a resident-led panel with rotating members and mandatory oversight. Elise volunteered. So did Ron, even Dana. Let's make sure this never happens again, Dana said. No more hiding, no more loopholes. The next morning, I rebuilt the treehouse. Not just a platform this time, but something real. A proper design with actual railings, a roof, and a ladder Sawyer helped paint bright green. We finished it by sunset. As we stood back and looked at it, Sawyer asked, "Is she going to come back?" I shook my head. "She can't hurt us anymore." "Not when we're all standing together." He nodded, then climbed up with a book and a flashlight, settling into the new cushions we'd placed by the railing. That night, for the first time in weeks, the cameras stayed quiet. No shadows, no threats. Just the sound of tree branches rustling in the wind, and a boy reading in peace. By the time the arraignment rolled around, the temperature had dropped, and the leaves in Willow Creek had begun to turn. Sawyer had healed up both leg and spirit, and the new treehouse had become something of a neighborhood landmark. But beneath the calm, there was a quiet buzz. People knew more was coming. Everyone could feel it. The courthouse was a squat brick building on the edge of town, not far from the old mill. I parked across the street and walked in with a folder under my arm, not just for show, but filled with statements from residents, screenshots of Vivica's internal documents, and a notarized timeline of the day she brought a chainsaw into my backyard. Inside, I spotted Ada Monroe near the courtroom doors. She was talking with a tall man in a dark suit, her co-counsel probably. When she saw me, she gave a curt nod. "She's going to request bail with supervised release," she said in a low voice. "We're opposing it." She still have people trying to scare residents? Monroe didn't answer directly. We've got affidavits from 3 more homeowners, anonymous but credible. One of them intercepted a letter from her attorney threatening to sue if they testified. That's obstruction. We're including it. Vivica entered 5 minutes later, flanked by 2 attorneys. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and she wore a gray pantsuit that tried to look modest but couldn't hide the steel in her spine. Her expression didn't flicker when she saw me. But her attorney glanced over and immediately whispered something in her ear. The clerk called the case. The judge, an older man with reading glasses perched on the bridge of his nose, wasted no time. Vivica's charges were read aloud in full detail, and her attorneys tried to paint the whole situation as a tragic misunderstanding exacerbated by neighborhood tensions. Monroe stood, hands folded calmly. Your Honor, this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate act of unlawful enforcement by a private individual, resulting in physical harm to a minor. The defendant acted without board approval, without legal authority, and without due process. She used tools in a manner that endangered lives. Furthermore, we have evidence she maintained a secret database to profile residents and used that information to target them. Vivica's attorney tried again. Miss Garland was attempting to maintain aesthetic standards in a growing community. The treehouse in question had been the subject of multiple complaints. There were no official citations, Monroe cut in. No authorization, and the child was inside when she began cutting. The judge leaned forward. I've read the filings, I've seen the footage. She's lucky that boy wasn't killed. Bail is denied. She'll remain in custody until trial. The room stayed quiet as Vivica was led out the side door. She didn't look back. Later that afternoon, Monroe called me. The search of her home turned up something unexpected, she said. We found a locked filing cabinet in the attic. Inside were sealed envelopes labeled with resident names. Each one contained photos, financial information, even employment records. My jaw tightened. That goes beyond HOA abuse. That's criminal surveillance. We're referring it to federal authorities. If any of that data was obtained without consent, we're looking at wire fraud and identity theft charges. Over the next week, the neighborhood shifted again, not just in tone but in structure. Curtis called a public meeting in the community center gym, one of the few HOA funds Vivica hadn't mismanaged. He stood at a folding table with Dana and 2 newly elected board members beside him. We're taking this opportunity to reimagine what Willow Creek should be, Curtis said. We've voted to disband the previous enforcement committee and replace it with a rotating resident review board. All violations will require photographic evidence and a 2/3 vote before any action is taken. No more unilateral decisions, no more fear. I raised my hand. What about Vivica's fines? The ones that were never real? Curtis nodded. We're nullifying all penalties issued under her presidency unless a resident chooses to uphold them. Refunds will be processed. The ledger is being reset. That got a small round of applause. Later, I stepped outside with Dana, who had become the de facto voice of the new board. She compiled dossiers, I said. What kind of person does that? One who thinks she's building an empire, Dana replied, but it was just a neighborhood. And now it belongs to the people again. I noticed Sawyer's art teacher, Mr. Riley, standing nearby. He approached me with a hesitant smile. I was on the fence about the HOA for years, he said. Never liked it, but I figured it was just part of moving into a nice place. I didn't realize how deep it ran. She was counting on that, I said. People being too busy, too tired to push back. Well, I'm not tired anymore, he said. Let me know if you ever need help with anything. That night, I found an envelope taped to our door. My stomach twisted for a moment, but when I opened it, I found a simple note. No more watching silently. Thank you. It was unsigned, but below the words were 3 small drawings, one of the treehouse, one of a gavel, and one of a crowd of people standing together. The trial moved fast. With overwhelming evidence and half the town willing to testify, Vivica's lawyer tried to negotiate a deal. The DA's office refused. In the end, she was convicted on all counts, sentenced to 6 years with parole eligibility after 4. Her assets were frozen, and the state filed a civil suit to recover illicit funds she'd funneled through the HOA. But the real victory wasn't the prison sentence. It was what came after. The residents of Willow Creek began restoring what she'd tried to break. Community work days replaced patrols. The new board published every decision online, with comment sections open to all. People who'd barely spoken before now helped rebuild each other's fences, replant gardens, and repaint mailboxes not because of rules, but because they wanted to. One afternoon, Sawyer and I sat in the treehouse watching the sun dip below the rooftops. "Is it over?" he asked. "Almost," I said. "And even if it's not, we're ready next time." He tapped the wood beneath him. "We should build another one, maybe a secret lookout," I smiled. "Let's make it open to every kid on the block." He nodded, already sketching something in a notebook. The treehouse had been the spark. But the fire had come from something deeper, a shared understanding that when power goes unchecked, good people have to stand up. Even if it means lawyers, courtrooms, and late nights staring at security footage, Vivica had turned a neighborhood into her personal kingdom. But in trying to control everyone, she'd only unified them against her. Now the kingdom was gone, and in its place was something better, a community.